It's April 26, 2010. We're here at the Oslo Freedom Forum, and I'm with Julian Assange, who is an Australian internet activist, and you are in WikiLeaks. Please tell us a bit about WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks is an international public service that helps people who have suppressed information get it out to the public where it can do some good. And the way we help people is through advanced cryptographic techniques, through the legal system, and through political defense. Then once that important information is published, we keep it public. That is also quite a difficult thing to do because of legal attacks or illegal attacks that are made by governments and by corporations. When you try and get something out, it may achieve a thing.
Exactly. You've chosen to locate in Sweden, right?
We have stuff everywhere, but we deliberately, for our reception of material, take it in through Sweden and pass it into Belgium and then to another country. And the reason is that Sweden, under the Swedish Press Freedom Act, has a subsection that grants a right to anonymity. Similarly, Belgium, as of 2005, introduced communications law that protects the communication between a journalist and their source. So you deliberately pick up those two protections, those two legal protections, by pushing information through Sweden and Belgium. And we have used this not just to, say, stop seizure of our servers or records in Sweden and Belgium, but to also prevent investigations occurring in other countries. We did that successfully early in 2009 with a case in South Africa about documents we had published relating to cartel behavior in the South African banks.
Exactly. And these threats to WikiLeaks and towards the people that are working in WikiLeaks, they are very much real, aren't they?
I mean, there's been over 100 attempts, legal attempts to attack us. Some of them quite serious, all of which, however, we have proceeded successfully with help from our friends. There have been some illegal attacks, attacks on our internet servers from China, which we have successfully dealt with. There have been surveillance attacks. And in Kenya there has been quite serious attacks on people who were related to us, including the assassination in March of two human rights lawyers, a raid on my compound.
Right, and of course, I mean, as viewers of Farman TV, we know that we support WikiLeaks very much, and what you do, I almost didn't ask you too much about that because it's self-evident sort of the kind of viewers that we have on this channel, and we could talk a lot about why it is important and all that, but I believe that might be covered on a lot of, that might be able to
I should say, the work that we have done has led to removal of the pending government. It has led to the removal of the social violence, which is gradually now being reduced. It has led to the resignation of the Chief of Defence of Denmark. It has led to the resignation of the Prime Minister of Tanzania. These are concrete outcomes, and along with those, there's a spectrum of other outcomes that are not as concrete, but we know the investigation started. Proposed legislative reforms going ahead, and to some degree WikiLeaks is the world's first free press, world's first truly free press. It's everything but for the material that is in the greatest need of a free press, the material which is other people cannot publish. So we are the sort of publisher of the last resort for journalists and whistleblowers who are trying to get it. And that's something that is new. We've never really seen a free press before that's managed to stay up for more than for more than a small period. And we are seeing a lot of beneficial reforms that are coming about by having a free press. There's no place in the world that is suffering presently from too much free press. And there's debates about how free the press should be. There is nowhere in the world that is suffering from having too free press.
Is there the ideology behind WikiLeaks is just to enable transparency, or is there more of a thought behind it than that?
There is. Our goal is justice. The goal is to have a just civilization. It's our sort of personally motivating goal. And the method is transparency. It's important not to confuse the method with the goal. But nonetheless, we believe that's an excellent method. Gaining justice with transparency. It's not only a good way of doing that, but it's also a way of not making too many mistakes along the way, not fooling yourself along the way. And we also have a trans-political ideology. It's not right, it's not left, it's about understanding. So before you can give any program about how to deal with the world, how to put the civil into civilization, how to gain things for your people. Before you can have that program, first you have to understand what is actually going on. How does the world actually work? How do human civilizations, institutions actually work? What are they doing? Because any remedy must be based upon what is actually happening in practice. Because if it's not based upon what is actually happening, then it's based upon some sort of fantasy, and therefore any program or recommendation, political ideology that comes out of that misunderstanding will itself be a misunderstanding. So we say that to some degree all political ideologies are currently bankrupt because they don't have the raw ingredients they need to address the world. The raw ingredients is understanding what is actually happening.
Are you then an anarchic sort of organization, or do you subscribe to the modern democratic progressive nation state, or?
Really, our belief is more fundamental. It doesn't matter what your ideology is, political persuasion. It can't go anywhere good unless you know what is actually going on. If you're trying to sail to a destination and you don't have a map, you cannot get there. You'll be adrift in the political landscape, adrift in history. So first thing for any political ideology is to understand what is actually going on. And then maybe you have a hope of getting there and charting the course. But you've got to have a map first. So we want to build the map. And of course, we do have some good information in our intellectual heritage. We do have some good information about science, what the weather is, about how to construct wood, how to grow forests. And we have some good information. But that part of the intellectual sphere is already well maintained. Economic forces behind maintaining it, or it's easy to maintain. There's no one trying to stop it. But there's another part of human history which has never really been in the historical record, because there are economic forces trying to get rid of it and trying to prevent it getting into the historical record in the first place. And that is all the information about how organizations work from the inside. That's not in the attempt to suppress it. There's an economic interest in concealing that. So we see that work, that effort that goes into concealing some types of information is an economic signal. Giving off a signal saying this information is important. It will do something when it is released. the public. That's why people work and spend economic effort to restrain it, because those individuals who know it best, the people who have authored it, they perceive that it's going to change things. So we preferentially go after this sort of information because we can see the signals and give them off, and because other sorts of information already have economic incentives to keep them around and get them into the this sort of information doesn't, and it can achieve just reforms. So both in terms of our long-term ideological view that civilization needs good information for good decisions to happen, and in our short-term view that you can achieve quick, fast, cheap, just reforms by going after that particular type of information over other types. This is sort of a good way to behave. It's a good, safe project. Because even if our long-term view doesn't pan out, that individuals and civilizations need accurate information to manage their lives, even if that's distracted or that never eventuates. We know that in the short term, every week we are achieving important, humane reforms.
Right. So, in a sense, you are manifesting the possibilities of the internet in its truest form. A lot of what's been going on since the internet was released has been experimentation in free speech, but you are sort of boiling it down to the essence.
We've drawn a line in the sand.
Right.
And no other group yet has drawn that line. And we've done that consistently.
Right.
When we publish something, we will never unpublish. We will fight with all the tools that are technical, political, and legal to make sure something is not unpublished. And any material of political relevance, or ethical, or diplomatic, or historical relevance, that's our criteria, that is suppressed, we will accept. That's our line in the sand that we have consistently enforced. And previously no one has consistently enforced that. So this is, yes, part of this revolutionary ideal of the internet. And that, I suppose, that ideal has influenced us. But also these other factors about how do you guide civilization and how do you achieve justice. It all come together to try and do something that is clear and consistent. Right. It seems to be working so far.
Yes, and it's an honorable job that's been done so far, and looking at it in the kind of long-term perspective that you're drawing up now. This has really the potential for when sort of the society and the political structures adjust to this, which is a process that might take a couple of generations, or we really don't know, but it's already started. We can see that. We have the outlinings here for a different kind of society, really.
I hope so. We have seen that by being the free press vanguard, by drawing this line in the sand, placing ourselves and our defences there, we are opening up a space for everyone else behind us. So we are now the status quo, in that we have been publishing for 3.5 years consistently in this model and managed to defend ourselves. So, although we're certainly the free press vanguard, we're a vanguard that has been able to keep itself in that position successfully. So, everyone who publishes less aggressively is normal. So we've created that space behind us, and we're changing the view about what is normal and correct to publish. So that's something that's really very nice, to enable easier publishing for every other media organisation or every other group. human rights group, or anyone who's publishing on this. Of course, the work is still a long way from being done. I mean, many other groups are attacked legally and illegally every day, and their material is removed. But for those people who are intent on defending their material, we have shown it can be done. And we're also providing market disincentives for censorship. One of our promises is if there is material that is political, ethical, diplomatic, or historical significance that someone else publishes and it is attacked, we will republish it. So when we republish it, it means it's not going to go away. We will then defend it, and the fact that we publish it then tends to draw extra attention to the material. So that provides a strong market disincentive for attacking the original publisher in the first place. And we have done that successfully with many cases, but especially in the UK, where the press regime is really quite bad. There's 300 secret gag orders presently in effect in the UK. Those are injunctions on the press where not only can the press not mention something, but the press cannot mention that it cannot mention the injunction. It's sort of an Orwellian injunction. The other point I'd like to raise is you mentioned bringing freedom of speech to the internet. The internet by itself doesn't give freedom. The internet makes publishing cheap. So it doesn't give any extra freedom. That freedom is something that you bring to the internet, and you can bring it to the internet. So that's very important. You can actually do that because the publishing costs are cheap. But to some degree, the centralized internet publishing is very censorship favorable. So in 1954, when Stalin died, the head of the KGB, Beria, fell out of favor very quickly. And in the Encyclopedia of the Soviet Union, there was a section on Beria. And the Soviet government posted out to all the libraries a replacement page for Beria, which was an expanded section about the Bering Strait, the body of water between Vladivostok and Alaska. But of course, this was very obvious. This had to go out to every library, and then, they stuck it in, and if you went to that section of the encyclopedia, you said, what is this? There are 2 pages here with glued together what's going on. And you could even then peel it off. But now we have seen these cases in the UK where even a paper like The Guardian, who is a non-profit organisation run by a trust, duty is to guard the body politic in the UK, and does actually have a history of fighting some important legal cases, removes from its archive permanently and secretly information that litigious billionaires in the UK do not want. And once those articles are removed, and it is not just The Guardian, is a whole range of papers, and including the BBC, once that information is removed, and you go to look at those web pages, you just see page not found. You don't see that this page has been removed after a legal assault. You see page not found, and if you go into the indexes, there's nothing there in the indexes either. So it has ceased to ever have existed. So this obeys Orwell's dictum of he who controls the present, i.e. The Guardian's internet servers, controls the past. That was an historical archive, a historical publication 5 years ago, but it's gone. You control the present, you control the past, because the past is recorded in information that sits in the present.
And if you control the present, you control the future.
That's right. If you control the present, if you control history, then you control all the decisions that are made upon history. As I said before, the political parties and philosophies are all limited by what is our intellectual heritage. what is the historical record. So if you control the historical record, you control what decisions can be made. If you don't know about something, you can't make an active decision. So that's extremely worrying, that in fact the internet is the easiest thing in the world. And that article is removed from The Guardian. It's gone.
Right.
And even if there's copies, I mean, The Guardian still prints some of its stuff. It still prints physical paper, and it's in the library. And no one ever checks the library, because they look on the website, and if it's not there, people assume that it never was. They assume that these indexes are accurate, but they're not accurate. And it's not just the UK. It's Google, it's Blogger, it's WordPress, it's all over the place. People are being censored, and they don't reveal that they're censored. The reason they don't reveal that they're censored is because it reveals to the readership that they have been betrayed. The newspaper doesn't want to show that its readers that it's betraying its readers in this fundamental way. It makes the newspaper look weak to other people who might legally attack it. And it gives an example that you can get rid of information by attacking. So for all those reasons, it tries, and one more, for all those reasons it tries to keep the censorship secret. So the censorship is being self-censored. And the other reason is that often there's a legal argument that you will only encourage people to go to the library and look at the article if you mention that it was taken down, and therefore you'll contribute to whatever the offence was. So if the argument is that the material was libelous, and it very rarely is, the libel is usually just a made-up threat to try and get rid of stuff. But if the argument is, say, that it was libelous, and then the newspaper says, we removed this because we received a legal threat about libel, then the lawyers for the plaintiff, the people who are trying to get rid of that article, will argue that by revealing the censorship attempt, you're encouraging people to go to the library and look at the libelous article. So you're not even allowed to do that. And a friend of mine, Martin Bright, political editor for the New Statesman up to a year ago, lost his job over mentioning in a blog post the names of 5 Guardian articles that had disappeared. Just the names of the articles.
Right. This analogy with Orwell and 1984, of course, comes to mind, and if we look at if Orwell had written in WikiLeaks into the story, and if Orwell had said something about how he arrived at 1984, he doesn't say that much about it in the book. It's sort of just we're entering into his world, and we have to sort of guess how we went there. But in that world, WikiLeaks is removed somehow. They've been able to suppress WikiLeaks, and what WikiLeaks tries to do is an antidote to make sure that can never happen. But this epic struggle is something I guess we're afraid of, and that you're implying that we're even preparing for an epic struggle against Leviathan to try to shut WikiLeaks down. And how would they try to do that? How do we make sure that WikiLeaks can never be shut down?
Well, we have a lot of supporters in different countries. I mean, people who believe in liberty, who believe in justice, or people who want to see corrupt government suffer. There's sort of the 3 basic psychological types that support us in what we do. So, I mean, how can people stop it? I mean, when they see attacks on us, complain, do whatever you can in your particular area. Money is always helpful, because it's the most flexible of any instrument. Bring us leaked materials that are of really high significance, because if we keep pushing these out, not only does that sort of courageous action inspire other people, but it shows up an organisation that has influence on the world, and that people support and want to stay around. If you're in the law, there's lots of volunteer lawyers, but we always need to be around for cases in particular. So another very interesting and somewhat disturbing thing that is happening is the harmonisation of censorship between the East and the West. So whenever nation states interact on a continual basis, if their legal regimes are slightly different, the laws are different, they start to collide. That's where you get international law from. You know, this very basic notion of that when ships are at sea and they are passing each other, the approaching ship passes on the left. This basic notion is international law that means that there's not as much friction between international interactions. But this is now happening in banking, not just at sea. This is starting to happen on the internet. So this harmonisation of laws of various countries is happening on the internet. So what does that mean for freedom of speech? We're going to get a harmonisation. Is it going to be the laws of China? Is it going to be the Swedish Press Freedom Act? Is it going to be something like the First Amendment? Is it going to be some sort of privatised censorship? Not government, but private corporations can do it. Is it going to be internet filter blacklists? Centralised blacklisting of internet sites that China is, of course, famous for, but Germany has just passed legislation to do. And there are efforts to set up EU-wide centralised blacklist filtering of the whole internet. The Australian government has passed through one of its houses laws to do that. There are voluntary schemes in the UK, Switzerland, Norway, Denmark, Netherlands to do that. Voluntary at the ISP level, not at each individual person, but at the ISP level, typically covering 90-95% of the population. Will those schemes become mandatory? That's what the push is in the EU. So that harmonisation process is very dangerous, and it's going to go one way or it's going to go another. So within the next few years, so we should all try and push for it to be a little bit like the good parts, you know, the harmonisation of these good and protective laws instead of, the union of these good and protective laws instead of the union of these bad laws that China has. Big modern media initiatives that sort of pushing the other way to try and pull together these good laws around the world to make that a model. So individual nation states can try and upgrade their laws to be more libertine or more protective of the rights of sources and journalists and publishers to publish.
But the harmonization is inevitable.
The harmonization, I think, is inevitable.
All right.
The only question is, what will it be?
Because as long as we are not harmonized, there is an opportunity to sort of slip between the gaps, right? Between the laws and the structures. And WikiLeaks is using that, of course, in Sweden and Belgium. But you think that even China and the US, potential adversaries, will eventually sort of the political.
They have already done some harm.
Right.
WTO. Some aspects of intellectual property or patent law. That's a type of harmonisation that's occurring on the what rights do people have to publish their information.
Right.
And strong economic incentives to do that, because whenever these laws are different, there's an arbitrage opportunity, and then one nation state will complain that another nation state is sort of exploiting the difference between these two. So they will harmonise. The only question is to what.
Right, right. As long as they're not harmonized, of course, everyone working for these principles should use the fact that they are different and hope that this.
Well, they can be, they could harmonize to the best laws.
Right. Oh, of
perfectly
course.
possible. And I mean, that's what WikiLeaks is at the moment. By placing servers in different countries, we are sort of, in terms of our publishing operations and our source protection operations, we are doing that harmonization ourselves internally, where we take the best laws of many countries and give them to every country.
Right, right.
So we are able to do that by having this multi-jurisdictional publishing network. But that can also be done in law. Countries can harmonize up instead of harmonizing down, and they can harmonize to the best freedoms and the strongest publishing protections.
Exactly.
They don't need to harmonize down to the worst.
You're right,
But which way that goes will depend upon what people support, and where the incentives are, and where the lobby pressures are. It's very interesting at the moment because this is up in the air. And the ball really is up in the air. It could go either way.
And WikiLeaks, of course, gives an incentive to harmonize upwards because it's out there, and as long as it cannot be stopped. So it's really essential that now WikiLeaks is. I don't know the technology behind it, but I assume that it's replicated and that it's hard to technically shut it down. So as long as the internet is operational in some form or another, it will be up there. But the threat is more sort of organizational than technical, isn't it? Or legal, and sort of the threats are...
The threat is more, at the moment, is sort of death by 1,000 cuts. So it's the expense in running all this, and the expense in defending ourselves against these legal attacks, which we managed to do successfully. But there's a cost in this, and as an organisation grows, it has scaling problems, and we're sort of being a victim of our own success in some ways. In that we're receiving a vast number of extremely important documents and videos, but we don't have the resources to go through them all, and that pains us terribly, because the promise we give to our sources is that we will not only protect them, but we will try and maximize the impact of their material, so that their efforts haven't gone to waste. And so every day that we sit on material and delay publishing is to some degree a betrayal of that promise that we make our sources. But we get a lot of material and we only have a finite number of people, and a finite number of resources. So we just cannot publish as fast as we are receiving material. And that means that our reform impact is being limited, although it's still very good, but it has been limited by that inability to get through material as fast as we'd like. And we did go, oh well, what if you just instantly sort of publish everything you receive? Become a sort of file site and just publish material. So we did some early experiments on this line. The problem is that the bad drives out the good, and that if you permit false material or just junk, or people republishing something that has already been published before, hasn't been censored, it's just unpopular because people don't care about the issue.
Right.
If you put all this in the same bowl with really significant documents like the main manuals for Guantanamo Bay we published, or documents exposing billions of dollars worth of corruption in Kenya, or tens of billions of dollars of money laundering, money shuffling by Barclays Bank. If you put these sort of just random information in the same bowl, it means that the strong material has no impact. So really you do need people to actually go through this and say, yes, this is a genuine document, we've checked it out, and this is what it means, and it's important, and it hasn't been published before. That's how we're managing to have an important impact, is by giving some authority to this material.
Right. What you're touching on there, of course, also is people, the users of WikiLeaks, knowing that what they're seeing and viewing is WikiLeaks. Because I've already seen that you've had imposters on Facebook trying to be WikiLeaks without actually being WikiLeaks. And I liked the group on Facebook, and I found out it was the wrong group. It wasn't sort of the official the WikiLeaks. So how do the individual make sure, both now sort of practically, but also for the long term, for generations, that you know what you're viewing is really WikiLeaks and not some sort of imposter or someone putting a filter over it, or
yeah, so that's hard. I mean, we have an SSL page, so it's encrypted connection, wikileaks.org, but of course it's possible that they take down a domain name. We have many other alternative domain names as well to deal with China's censorship. This is actually quite an interesting problem in cryptography. How do you verify someone is who they say that they are, even though the internet address might change? So at the moment, the answer is sort of social. At the very moment, the answer is easy. Go to wikileaks.org. That is us. Unless we one day lose that domain name. There was an attack on it in February 2008 by Swiss Bank, and we lost it for 10 days. They didn't put up a different one, but we managed to produce a counter case and get it back. But there's, we have tendrils and networks, different mediums, Twitter and elsewhere. So if you search around enough of these are going to point to the real place. And our cryptographic certificates, it's a little bit harder to fake. It would require some fabrication in the United States for a company that specializes in producing these certificates. That's an interesting question.
Right. On cryptography that we were just on, making sure that future generations know that the WikiLeaks material is the genuine one, because we can imagine some person 200 years from now finding a disk, right, with the WikiLeaks material, and we've been having 1984 for 6 generations.
Yeah. This is a very interesting question. So we actually do have the internal proposal about how to deal with that. But it will take some work, but maybe not too much. So this is a very interesting question about how do you name something. And when I say the US First Amendment, you know what I'm talking about, approximately. Now you may not be able to remember all the text, but you know that you can go somewhere and look this up. But then how do you know it's the real First Amendment? Well, you know that in practice, you know that this text is spread very far and wide. It's in many different things. So each source sort of provides a consistency check for the other. And so we're able to talk about this in conversation without quoting the whole paragraph, the whole sentence. And something that's quite interesting. But what if you have a longer document and you have a name for it? It's not spread too far. Maybe it's only in a couple of libraries. And then someone changes. Let's imagine it is the First Amendment, but there's only 2 books with it in, and someone changes one, and then someone changes the other the same way.
Right.
And now we discuss this at First Amendment, and you go, "Oh, I think it's like this." And I go, "No, it sounds strange. It's not quite like what I remember. Let's go check in the books." And then we see this modified version. So this is once again this Orwell's victim version. You control the present, you control the past. Right. Control the past, you control the future. And in this case, the interpretation of the First Amendment. Of course, it is actually spread everywhere, so in practice that doesn't happen. But for new stuff, it's just coming out, for new documents of political relevance, and in our case, for new leaks, they're really extremely important documents that may change a whole government. How do we ensure that they are consistently named and not changed, as they're copied, say, to mirror sites, other sites that copy our material, or a really, really important document, and say, we're structured to avoid being defeated in lawsuits, but let's imagine the worst came to the worst. The totalitarian move across the world, there was World War III or something, not with nuclear weapons, but some other kind of war. How would we keep that sort of consistency between the name of something and its full representation? So in cryptography there is a way to do that, a natural way to do that, which is called a hash cipher. So you can take a string of information, any sort of information, from one sentence to a paragraph to a whole book to a whole movie, and you can sort of crunch it all down, squish it all down to just left with 32 characters. And these 32 characters are inextricably bound up with the precise book, paragraph, movie, whatever sequence of information you have, anything that you can transmit over. It's bound up and has important properties that if you modify this in any way, even change a letter, this will also change. And if you have this short reference to this bit of information, there's no other, you can't deliberately make some other type of information, other movie that corresponds to this.
Right.
So these are sort of uniquely bound. But this thing, because it's only 32 characters or 16 characters, you can actually communicate this very quickly. These are sort of random characters, so human beings can't say them, but you can cut and paste them. Fine. So they're sort of like as useful as URLs. You can spread these around. And these are for all time guaranteed to sort of be permanently bound. They're true names for something. A true name, a true representation can't be changed. So the only problem with them is that there's some string of random characters, and they're very hard to remember. So unlike the US First Amendment, which I just said to you, and I can remember these are something like 80S1527862, etc.
All right.
But you can stick them in documents and cite them and reference. And we have another scheme to then make a mapping between these hash references, these sort of true names, crunched down, compressed stuff, to have a correspondence between these and words you can remember. And then we don't have to worry about these, and we can just communicate this. So the way of thinking about this is you may have seen something like tinyURL or bit.ly, something like this. What semantic role are these fulfilling? What sort of cognitive role are these fulfilling? They take some URL, an annoying string of characters, which is not too long, but it is kind of long. It's hard to remember. Maybe 3,500 characters, something like this. They take that annoying thing and then they map it onto something that's short and easy to remember. tinyurl.com/first A, the First Amendment. Maybe that goes to some library page, Library of Congress. So you can actually remember this short one. You can't remember this long URL. So this is actually the same basic problem as having a sort of a string of numbers, 32 characters of numbers that are hard to remember, and something that is short is easy to remember. So we have this plan for a sort of distributed version of tinyURL where you can't change the mapping. So the information spreads out to servers, and there's no delete function. So when you create this first mapping between, let's say we take the First Amendment as text, a sentence of text, and then, this is getting technical, but we apply this hash cipher to it. So now we crunch it down to some numbers,
right.
which are there's a permanent correspondence to these, an intrinsic correspondence. This is this string of numbers is a sort of true name for this First Amendment.
Right.
But this is hard to remember.
Yeah.
But we'll always refer to this thing, and not refer to anything else ever. Now we produce a short string. We can choose it. First A. It's what we choose. That's easy to speak about. Or even just First Amendment. And now we correlate this First Amendment, the string First Amendment, with these numbers, which then correlate to the whole expansion of the First Amendment. We spread this correlation between, like tiny URL does with URLs, we spread that to a bunch of servers which don't have any delete function. So now it's set there permanently.
Right.
Problem solved. And so now whenever you say First Amendment in this on a normal converse splitter, I say, what is the short name for First Amendment? This is the true name, this sequence of numbers.
Right.
This is the short name, the sort of easy to remember human representation.
Right.
What is the short name for that? You tell me. Oh, it's First Amendment. Okay. So now we go bang from here, First Amendment, to the full text of the First Amendment. It doesn't matter where it's stored.
Right.
Could be stored on a CD, could be stored on any internet server. The domain names could change, etc. It will always refer to precisely the same thing. Doesn't matter if it's stored on the Guardian and it gets litigated and taken down, or changed. You will know that it has changed because the true name will have changed, and therefore the short name won't refer to the same thing anymore.
Exactly.
Then have a consistent way to refer to things, any intellectual information, consistently and permanently. It cannot be changed as time goes by.
Of course, you're not safe from social interpretation change at the societal level. I mean, a totalitarian government could change the meaning of words and concepts, and sort of, if you're indoctrinated in a public school 16 years or whatever, then, First Amendment, it means, sort of...
Yeah, yes and no. This will slow down that change, because we can also imagine some word like Congress. Congress has a dictionary definition. So we stick the whole dictionary into this system. For every word, Congress has an expansion. Maybe, and then we have some true name for that, or some series of numbers. Hard to remember. But then let's make a short name for it. Congress def. You say, I stick this into Congress def. I do this for every word in the dictionary. I'm just going to say that T def, teacup def, whatever.
Right.
Those are going to be my short names for this heritage dictionary, or some Collins or something like that. Stick it all into this system. Congress def is now inextricably bound up with that definition. It cannot change. Now, of course, the meaning of words does change. Maybe you want to stick another dictionary in later on. But you can't sort of rest out this. If it was the heritage dictionary, you can't change that.
Right. I see your point.
Time goes by. So if you write some article or some paper and you say Congress def, all right, when I talk about Congress, what I mean is Congress def. When I talk about First Amendment, what I mean is First Amendment. And you put that in your article, and any reader in the future can look up precisely what you were speaking to.
Exactly.
And if you also speak about another paper you were basing this paper on, or your article, or another book, and that book has been put into the system, the reader can know precisely what you're referring to. Exactly.
No, I agree. These are sort of technical discussions that are extremely fascinating. If we sort of round up by going back to the kind of people that WikiLeaks are exposing, usually politicians. What is your sort of view on the politician? Is he a prisoner of his circumstances, and that WikiLeaks is sort of, because not all of them are necessarily evil, right? Even though they do evil things.
Obama's a good example. Obama has two things that he considers as values that he believes are virtues. Number one is compromise in politics. Not as a means, but as an end. That is an inherent virtue to balance the political forces around you. And there's some argument for this. So that is what a politician should be doing. Not taking sides, but just balancing the power. Remember, what is politics in its essence about? It is about allowing transfers of power without bloodshed. That's where it all comes from. That's where the first parliaments came from. We'll sort this out in Parliament, we won't have to go to war with each other. So you see failings in Parliament, you should also understand the success, which is, the basic success is stopping people killing each other when one group starts to get more power. So Obama believes that is a virtue, an end goal. And he's concerned with some, within the United States, some inequality issues. And it seems that, to me, it seems that those are the only two things he considers as end goals. And the first one, I think, is a mistake. It is making the method the goal. So just like WikiLeaks, our goal is justice, our method is transparency. We don't confuse the goal and the method. Obama's goal is compromise. I would rather say his goal should be justice and his method should be compromise. But even if you don't have this idea that compromise is a virtue, you are limited in your ability to act as a politician by the forces that are around you. Everyone, industry and individuals, shapes what politicians can do by shaping the environment that is around them. And if you have a purely compromising politician, there's one exception of quality in the United States, purely compromising politicians like Obama, then they are completely shaped by the forces that are around them. So if you push a little bit more here, you get a different response.
Exactly. And they adapt to this, of course. So this is very much a two-way street.
Yeah. So by releasing information which either exposes some abuse that causes democratic outrage, widespread democratic outrage, and then a push from the demos, a push from the people in a particular direction.
Right.
Or what I find is actually more interesting and possibly more important is revealing information that causes the increase in power of one group over another group, or it causes a group to sort of fall in on itself. So I should explain some examples where I've seen this in action. So in Kenya in 2007, we got hold of something known as the Kroll Report, which was a secret report produced by a UK private intelligence organisation, Kroll, paid for by the Kenyan government to investigate where all the money went from the previous Kenyan government. It cost, they paid Kroll around $3 million to produce this and some other reports. It's stated intent that they would be released to the public, and they were not released to the public. Instead, the Kibaki government kept this report, which revealed extensive money laundering and looting of state funds, and used it as leverage. He uses a stick to get political concessions. And Daniel Arap Moi, the previous president, was the wealthiest man in Kenya and lots of land. So those concessions were significant. So when we released it, yes, there was political outrage from the demos, from the people. And yes, that did have an effect on the election. But I think something else had a greater effect, which is that all the people named in that report started to see that the other people named in that report were getting more than they thought they were getting when they were cutting up the money, and that one had betrayed another and so on, and they all saw what the bank accounts were and the
divide and conquer,
where all the money went. So they all fell in on themselves and all became incredibly paranoid about who had been talking to the investigators and so on. And they were also at the same time trying to run for a national election. And it was impossible to stop their money disappearing, fight with each other, and run the national election. So they all lost. All the 5 politicians named in that report lost, and Kibaki, the president who had just gone into alliance with the previous president, Daniel Arap Moi, he also lost the popular vote. So that I've seen this happen with a number of organizations. That who is the actual audience for material that we release? Is it the general public? Is it actually the organization that it comes from? The sort of dissenters in that organization? The whole organization can become incredibly paranoid. If it's a closed, secretive organization and information starts leaking out, it can become incredibly paranoid about who is doing this on the inside. So no one trusts each other anymore in the organization. They stop communicating with each other. They don't trust their telephone lines. They don't trust their computers. Or that closed, secretive organization to take information about the world and think about it, communicate it inside the organization, and then act. It can't think anymore. So as a sort of group or an organization, it can no longer outthink its competitors. And many of these organizations, be they political parties, be they conspiratorial groups of criminals, or be they businesses, are only just in equilibrium with their competitors. And because they're acting in a way which is often inhumane or corrupt or criminal, they have lots of opponents. So if you cause them to sort of collapse as an organization, to not be able to communicate with each other internally, to become paranoid and fall in on themselves, they are no longer competitive as an organization compared to all those organizations that are more open and are their opponents. So the power of these organizations starts to shrink, and the market gap is then taken up by the more open organizations, which don't have this problem with secrecy. So that's a really nice outcome. And the other one that's related to that is competing organizations can sometimes directly use that information. It's clear when you have competing political parties and information is leaked out by one, or where you have competing businesses, information about some business practices leaked out, or when you have competing states and information about the behavior of the intelligence organization of one is revealed to the public, but the public may not care about it, but the competing nation state may care a great deal about it.
Absolutely. There's so many issues here, and I mean, we could dig into this, but I need to ask you about personal privacy and sort of, I mean, there's the big issue of privacy within WikiLeaks and the right for people to have their personal details for themselves and all that. But there's also everything going on now with Facebook and your personal graph being all public, and these questions are somehow related. What is your view on private matters and personal digital privacy?
So important when I'm asked this question important place to start is looking at our publishing record, because we have a 3.5-year publishing record now. We publish an enormous amount of material, and there's no allegation that anything we have ever published has harmed someone who shouldn't have been harmed. And there's people who have lost their jobs, including prime ministers and defence chiefs have lost their jobs, politicians have lost their jobs. But those are people that we broadly accept should have lost their jobs. Otherwise, there's been no allegation that anyone's done harm. So, in a couple of cases, we've done a harm minimisation process. For example, the British National Party, which is the far right, literally in its origins neo-Nazi party in the UK, very controversial, interesting in some ways. It's another story. They had a secret membership list of around 13,000, together with, in some cases, why the people are secret? Because they are members of the police force. The police force doesn't allow British National Party members because it's a whites-only party and was a whites-only party until just recently, and has a constitution along those lines. So if a police officer agrees to this constitution, then they're sort of inherently agreeing that they want to evict all non-whites by force from the UK. That means probably can't, as a police officer, fairly dispatch the law against whites and non-whites. That is the argument that's made. I'm not sure if I completely agree with that argument, but anyway, that's the argument that's made. And that is why the British National Party wanted to keep that information about its members secret, the police force, because if it came out, they would be fired.
Right.
We wrote to, before we released the list, we wrote to them all and said we're going to release the list.
All right.
So,
13,000?
Yeah.
Oh, indeed.
Take what precautions
All right.
you feel you need to.
Right.
Now, of course, we didn't not release the list. That would be a breach of our promise to our sources.
What do you mean by the...
But we took steps, not perfect steps,
Right.
of course, but reasonable steps to minimise the harm. And there was no harm other than some people losing their jobs that we're aware of.
But is that explicit within WikiLeaks that you will do this, or is it part of your core who you are? Right.
I mean, we state, provided material fits our editorial criteria, which is publicly stated what that criteria is, we will publish it. We guarantee it. We will publish it.
Right.
So our only sort of, within this clear framework that we have given ourselves and the public, the only room to move is whether we can delay publishing it a little and engage in a harm minimisation process during that delay. And so that's what we do, and that has worked. Now, if there is a case that comes along later on where that there's clearly going to be, not clearly, but there is a reasonable likelihood, not an unreasonable one, but a definite reasonable likelihood of some serious harm coming, and that harm minimisation process doesn't work, then we will consider a different one. But so far, informing and delaying a little bit has worked. We haven't needed to do that many times.
Right. Well, this has been an amazing interview about an amazing topic, an amazing organization that is driving change, and that we will definitely follow with great interest going forward. We thank you for your work, Julian, with this organization. I have personally donated money to this organization, not much, but some. And I encourage everyone to consider doing that. It's wikileaks.org. Make sure that you go to the right site and not to someone claiming to be WikiLeaks. Wikileaks.org is the site, and you will find links there to contact them and possibly donate money to them. And thank you for this interview, Joe.
You're welcome.